Thank you to new Tier 1 patron Matt McLellan. Become a patron for early access to next episode with Cherry Bong, a Gen 2 OU YouTuber. Our conversation will be up on Patreon early next week. Finchinator is the tier leader of Smogon's OU format, a key figure in deciding the fate of specific Pokemon and other rule set implementations in the 6v6 singles format. Finchinator has had a very different approach towards his leadership of Gen 9 OU, with frequent action being taken towards new and powerful Pokemon and moves, plus a lot more community involvement with the new survey system that has been quite successful. Some of Finchinator's decisions have been controversial though, such as his advocacy for the sleep ban that ended up happening, and also the unbanning of Pokemon like Darkrai and Zamazenta, which some in the community think was a mistake. Decisions aren't entirely up to Finchinator on these things, of course, as there is a council who votes on some of these choices, and sometimes the community weighs in, with suspect votes. While I have disagreed with some of his specific opinions about Pokemon or rule set changes, I think Finchinator has overall taken a great approach with Gen 9 OU that has resulted in a pretty balanced and enjoyable metagame in its current state. Thank you for taking the time to chat today, Finchinator, and how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Happy to be here, and thank you so much for having me.
This is the second time I've actually interviewed Finchinator, folks, and the first time was pretty early on in Gen 9. I think just after Cheat U got banned, and now a lot has changed, of course.
Oh yeah, it's been a long time. A lot has changed. Some good, some admittedly shaky, but we're all feeling it out and improving. One action at a time. So I'm happy to be back, and it's awesome to see how much your platform has grown. And of all the amazing hard workers, a lot of them are deserving, and you very much fit in that category. And it's so cool to be on this podcast and have another chance to talk to you and all of your amazing viewers.
Oh, thank you. Been working hard in the Pokemon mines. I spoke with Pinkercross recently on the podcast, who I'm sure you're familiar with. Great at Gen 9 and Gen 8 player.
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I did watch part of it. I also watched your podcast with Frieza recently, and I've been tuning in. I've talked with both of them before as well. Great people.
Yeah, it's been cool to talk to all these key figures in the community. And something I said to Pinkercross was that actually at the moment, I think I like Gen 9 OU more than I did Gen 8 and 7. Like, of all the modern recent metagames, I kind of like Gen 9 in its current state. I think that has a lot to do with the different approach to tiering they've taken, where action has been quicker this time around. Like, I remember back in Gen 8, Dracovish was running around for ages. And, like, everyone knew it was broken, but we sort of just let it happen for a while with, like, all the due process and everything. Sometimes I think you can make decisions quicker and stuff like that, and some things are a bit more divisive and less clear.
Yeah, part of it, and I was cheerleader at the start of Gen 8 and at the end, but not so much in the middle. But during the Dracovish saga, I was. Part of it was getting your footing, because at the start of Generation 8, a user by the name of ABR, who I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, was slated to be the tier leader. And he ran into some controversy revolving sleep clause, which I'm sure we'll touch on later. And he ultimately decided to step down just because he didn't want to be in the spotlight, in the ire of the public as much. And I was kind of thrust into the position. And I think I was too scared to make bold decisions. And I will take accountability for that, because I think part of being, a big figure in the community is being accountable for better or worse. And something like Dracovish or Arena Trap, part of it was dancing around the new DLC and home releases, which I didn't really know what to expect. And they kind of felt like I was like walking through a minefield, and they blew up right, like literally as I had a suspect ready to go. So I had to hold it back. But another part of it was just being too scared to quick ban things. So now you see this generation where I've been tier leader the whole time. And thankfully, we're in a position where I'm more confident. And maybe some people doubt that confidence, and that's all right. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I've been able to act more aggressively. I've been able to use data to back my opinions. And I've been able to have greater community outreach thanks to starting things like my Twitter account. Or I used to post my YouTube videos. Maybe one day in the near future I'll do that as well, but not right now. But just being able to reach the public and help people understand why things are happening.
I think overall it's gone well, so I appreciate your efforts. And it is kind of a thankless job in many ways. You're not getting paid or anything. It's just out of...
No, I mean, I don't do it for the thanks. I do it because I like... And I know this isn't at the forefront, but I love this community. And you're more often than not, you're probably going to see me arguing with someone, be it on Twitter, on the forums, or whatever it may be. But I really do love this community. Like, when I was a silly 12-year-old middle schooler who was like, I don't know what to do with my summers when I'm not in school, I found Pokemon online, and eventually that, of course, became Pokemon Showdown and Smogon. And I spent many hours playing this game, making friends on what was initially IRC or Internet Relay Chat, and then became Skype, and now Discord. Wow, I just aged myself a lot to plenty of your viewers, I'm sure. And this is in part, giving back, and in part, making this hobby that I'm sure many other people view fondly, like I have, and will continue to do so into the future, hopefully, better for them, better quality of life. And, part of it definitely took a long time for me to become the leader I am now. And I don't think I'm a perfect leader now, actually. And I appreciate you giving me credit and saying it worked out well. I actually think that there's still a ton of work to do, a ton of improvement, both for me and the metagame, but I'm very happy with how far I've come and how far the community's come. And I'm just, the vibes are good. I think I like summing things up with vibes, and the vibes are good, and they haven't always been good. So let's keep them good.
I think I might just like jump right into the deep end and ask you about sleep right away. Because that's like the most controversial thing that's happened recently in OU, where a lot of people disagreed with that decision. And I made a video about it myself.
You did.
And,
Yes, I watched the video, and I believe we spoke beforehand, which I actually really appreciated. And not so much I appreciated that we felt differently, because I don't really mind if you agree or disagree with me. There's always going to be prominent people who disagree on most things that aren't like crazy unanimous, like Ursulana Blood Moon. I think everyone agreed needed to get the hell out of here. But sleep is something more fundamental. And here's where, in my opinion, it all comes down to. Sleep clause is something that it works. It works in the games at keeping sleep in the game while being balanced. But it's kind of arbitrary. There's no real justification or basis for it besides going all the way back 20 years to when it was in a game. There's no, sleep clause on the cartridge. There's no sleep clause in VGC. There's nothing that relates to it. And a lot of people back in Generation 7, which is where there was an initial policy review thread on it, wanted to overturn it. And back then, things like Tapu Koko and Electric Train were prominent, and Pokemon with sleep, especially early in Generation 7, weren't really around that much in the limited decks at the time. Eventually, everything came out. Generation 8, not Generation 7, I apologize. Eventually, things came out a little more, but with that in mind, it was limited. And a lot of people were like, maybe we should do away with sleep clause, which actually, circling back to what I said in ABR actually removed sleep clause unilaterally without like approval, like no checks and balances. And he got so much backlash from that he stepped down, which led to me being tier leader, which is kind of funny how we're going full circle here.
And then you did it again.
I did it again.
Yeah, but not the same way, obviously.
I do think I did it differently. So we had a survey, and surveys are good, but I do think I overused surveys. Overused, not like, no pun intended, earlier this generation. I think surveys are more so meant to get a occasional pulse, a vibe check of the metagame, as opposed to running them every third week and saying, oh, this incremental thing changed, this new Terrablast type is used on Volcarona. Do you think it's broken now or it was a week ago? Like, no, maybe every couple months. But on big topics like that, I like surveys because they let you know that a lot of people thought that there was something wrong with the metagame, be it Darkrai using sleep moves or sleep moves. And a lot of people thought that there was an issue because not only was Darkrai running rampant with this lead set with Sash Hypnosis, 60% of the time it gets a kill and a half, it gets a free turn, 40% of the time it might do nothing. It's just like suddenly we go from playing Pokemon to slots, and then people emulated the strategy on Iron Valiant, where they used Hypnosis, Calm Mind, Hex with Terra Ghost, and suddenly things like Slowking Galar get like beaten down really badly, and it was clear that something had to be done. And I could either look into the Pokemon, which is an entirely valid perspective, and I could have banned I probably could have quick banned Darkrai at this time. I'll be full disclosure with that. And Iron Valiant probably would have had to be a long suspect, or I could have looked into sleep and sleep clause. And in my opinion, there was no basis for sleep clause beyond tradition. And I don't really care about tradition. A lot of people do, and I respect those people. But, sleep had already been banned in a prior generation, Black-White. Famously or infamously, you could debate the merits of it. And it also had been discussed in DPP. I don't actually know what happened in DPP, if anything. I'm not a prominent DPP player, but it was obviously a hot button topic there with Breloom, among others. And I was like, Black-White did it. It felt successful. I have a ton of people asking for action right now. And a quick ban on a Pokemon as prevalent as Darkrai would have been a hard sell And a ban of sleep also would have been a hard sell. So at that point, it wasn't a matter of who I can appease the most. It was a matter of what's the best policy decision? What's the best for the tier? You know, people are going to be mad either way. So sometimes you got to throw that out and just say, I have support for both these options. What does my council think? What do I think? And, you know, in terms of policy, in my opinion, it was always best to target sleep because sleep clause just wasn't as justified in the modern day's context. So we essentially removed sleep clause and banned sleep-inducing moves, which made it so that Darkrai was, at the time, balanced, and Iron Valiant became very much balanced. It's going to be a discussion that at the start of Generation 10, we're going to reevaluate. And I think each generation, you know, is allowed to do what they want with their player base, of course. You know, that's why we don't have uniformity between, let's say, SS and ORAS or SV and SM. You know, there's a range of things, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that ultimate discussion that happens at the end of this generation will, you know, be the greater rule for time to come, if you will. But for now, I thought that was the best decision. People are obviously entitled to disagree. A lot of people think we should have quick banned Darkrai. I don't really have I don't think that's objectively wrong. I just think that's favoring tradition over, you know, a newer way of thinking. And that's fine. You know, we all have our own priorities. The beauty of it all is that for things this hyper-specific, there's no firm priorities. It's my job as leader and my council's job as council to dictate, you know, what is the priority, what isn't the priority. And we made a decision. Now, the one issue a lot of people had with our decision was, why didn't we leave it up to a suspect? And this is something that I will speak more firmly on because I do think there's a right and wrong on this. And I understand I'm going to butt some heads with people in your comments, and I apologize for that in advance. But I don't think the point of a suspect is to let people determine what our priorities and what our precedents are. I think the point of a suspect is if you get Rex, you're competent in the metagame, you could determine if X is broken or not broken. This is more nuanced. It's, you know, it's based in precedent. It's based in evaluating what our priorities are. And I don't think being able to play 30 or 40 games on the OU ladder with a good win rate gives you the qualification for that. And my tiering admin agreed with that. And, you know, if you look at the history of suspects in current generations, there's never been one like that. So I do feel like I'm on the right side of history there, but I understand it looks kind of elitist to say that to people who maybe could have participated in a suspect, but aren't on my 10, well, now 9-person council. So I understand there's beef. I understand how it sounds. I do think we behaved in a healthy, justifiable fashion, but I also think that it's going to be one of the most controversial topics in the history of competitive Pokemon, alongside terastallization, which, you know, this gen has been full of it, and it's going to continue to be full of it, and that's kind of why I love it, and that's kind of why I'm happy to be in the thick of it, and that's why I'm going to own any criticism, and I'm going to take it to heart, and I'm going to respond with how I feel. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for a very detailed response there. That is where I personally took issue with it, was that it wasn't a suspect. And you said that it's like a policy issue and not a evaluation of whether something is broken or not. I guess I disagree, because I view a testing of sleep as a mechanic within this specific metagame as a similar thing to like evaluating whether Terra is broken in the Terra suspect test. Like I view it's a fundamental mechanic.
Maybe, but can I counter that if you don't mind?
Sure.
So when we did the Terra suspect, the council determined the parameters. We weren't going to allow Terra on X Pokemon and not Y Pokemon. We weren't going to allow anything, for lack of a better term, to ratchet. You know, we determined the specific parameters of it. The only viable suspect in my eyes would have been like a hyper-specific suspect that had like 3 prongs. We're like, oh, do we A, ban Darkrai, B, ban Darkrai and Iron Valiant, C, just ban Sleep, or D, do nothing? And something like that was just like so overly specific, and it felt as if it was almost not like acting in good faith in the sense of a council, because like the description of our jobs is to determine that policy and set up the framework for the community in the somewhat democratic process to make those decisions. It felt like we were almost understepping rather than overstepping, but I think a lot of people perceive that as us not giving them the chance to participate, as us actually overstepping. And that's just where my view of what a council is contrasts what maybe your view or the next guy's view. And I understand where you're coming from. I just don't know that I personally agree.
Right. So it's a slightly like awkward thing to set the parameters for in terms of what people will be voting on. And that was actually a criticism what people had during the Terra suspect, was that the options were a bit strange. Like one of them was to, I believe, you could only Terra into your stab types, which in retrospect is kind of a weird choice, where that would not really solve the issue.
That's Yeah, so the initial Terra test was good in terms of timing, bad in terms of format. Bad with an asterisk. The options that needed to be there were there, but there were like 2 extra nonsense options. We were deep in the lab trying to cook, and like I take this so seriously. I really do. I work full time. I have a lot going on in life, but the amount of time I spend on my phone, like looking at Discord, chatting with people, not only in my council, but also like good players. And, a lot of people at this time had very different opinions. We had some people saying, if you ban Terra, the whole generation's ruined. It's going to be a Gen 8 clone, which I didn't dislike Gen 8, but neither here nor there. Somebody saying, oh my God, if this remains in the game, suddenly we're going to be playing Digimon. This isn't real. This isn't in the spirit of the game. You have people that are amazing players on both sides. And then you have people like, oh, we could fix this. We could do this middle ground situation, that middle ground. And some of these got enough support both internally and in my ear that I kind of had my perception skewed. And this was a big lesson for me as a leader. I need to lead based on myself and what my council's feeling. I can't succumb to external pressure or even sometimes internal pressure if that internal pressure maybe is ill-advised. And things like Terra Captain is cool for Draft League, but it doesn't really do much in our singles OU format. Stab Terra is laughably silly. At the time, it seemed like, oh, this is cool. We could at least keep it in the game. In reality, it wouldn't do anything. In fact, it might even make it worse. It might make our game less competitive. So again, I think the timing of the suspect, good. I think the fact that Terra preview and no action and outright ban were all options, the big 3, if you will, good. But everything else was me, getting my feet wet, learning a lesson that I probably should have already learned, and I'll own it. I think that was a 4 out of 10 suspect when for something like that, you need to be 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I think what ended up happening was like at first there's a binary decision of like should action be taken or not, and you vote on that. And then if you vote yes on action, you got to vote for the specific sub action you want.
Yeah,
like,
it was also like
I want Terra preview,
yeah.
or I want the stab thing, or the only one Pokemon could Terra thing. So that kind of muddied the water where some people want action, but they disagree on which action.
Yeah, so that too. So
people voted no action, even if they wanted action, which is kind of weird.
It could have been better. Again, I'm saying it's a 4 out of 10 when it needs to be an 8 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. If I could do that again, it would be a lot more simple. But if I could do a lot of things over, I do them differently. And I'll be the first to admit that it's a learning experience. And, people are going to say, oh, if you're in this position, you got to be better. And I don't have a counter to that. I just got to say, I nod, I agree, you're right, I should have been better. And I think I'm better now, and I think that's been reflected. But the Terra suspect had a lot of good components, but was flawed. And there's no denying that flaw.
I'm not holding that against you or anything. It was like very complex, and you hear a million voices yelling at you from every direction.
Yeah,
and all of them have like conviction with like, just do this and it's solved. But it's not that simple. Like some like little Jimmy knows the solution.
It's like peer pressure in high school, if you will.
Yeah. So that's all good. It turned out okay not banning Terra. I think
it turned out better. And for the record, I thought Terra was very broken for the first month or two, even when I voted for like partial action initially. And then I kept playing, and I realized that I don't think that way anymore. It took a long time, but I don't think that way anymore. And I'm very glad it played out this way. I'm glad we didn't rush to a ban. I do think Dynamax in Generation 8 had to go. That had no place in the game whatsoever. But Terra, a better mechanic, arguably one of the best mechanics in the history of this game, and it's been crazy but exciting having it.
Yeah, when I talked to Pink Cross, I said, I also made a video about this. I think it's my second favorite of the generational gimmicks behind Megas. I like it more than Z-Moves and, of course, Dynamax. I think Z-Moves were a bit 1D. They just, do a lot of damage with this. There's some cool application, but usually it's just all right, Landorus can do a big flying MZ or something. But Terra's more dynamic, It's it makes Gen 9 really unique to play. It makes it stand out. Mm-hmm. And it's like a cool decision you have to make every game that is different every game, which I think is cool.
I think Generation 9 is skill intensive. I think Generation 9 is knowledge intensive in that you need to know the possibilities or potentially be in the know enough to know what surprises to do with your Terra types and choices. I do think that there is a slight bit of variance that comes with power creep Pokemon, and that's part of why we've had a lot of bans and tiering action, and that's part of why some people hate this metagame, and I can't blame them, but I do think it's skill intensive.
Yeah, okay. And it's cool that, even though Terra has led to tiering action on more things, like Regieleki or something wouldn't have been banned if Terra wasn't in the game. I think, it's cool to lean into what makes the game unique anyway. Preserving Terra instead of banning it so that certain things could be allowed. makes Gen 9
Agreed.
stand out more, which is I think is cool. Like, if you don't like Terra, there's plenty of other gens and formats to play, to be honest. Anyway, I think we got sidetracked a bit. I was talking about the sleep thing.
Sure.
So part of the issue is that it's a bit difficult to come up with a nice selection of options to even vote on in the first place. And also, like, it's one of the most awkward, like, metagame situations I've seen, where sleep isn't inherently broken, but on, like, a fast guy that gets a lot out of landing the sleep, like Iron Valiant. Like, Iron Valiant with Hypnosis is stupid. Like, you can just delete something and you're so fast, you got booster energy on. It's, like, completely idiotic. But something like Breloom is fine. It's too slow. There's a million things that could stop its spore.
Yeah.
So it's annoying because, like, sleep adds something in this sense, but then, like, there's no clean solution to it. You can't just ban Hypnosis because that's, like, arbitrary. And, like, some things are fine with Hypnosis.
Darkrai is just going to use Dark Void and be 10% less accurate.
Yeah, exactly.
So Amoonguss is not broken. Breloom is not broken, and even with Spore, isn't particularly good. You could go down the list of Sleep Powder users and, mostly say the same, especially in a metagame with Gliscor with Poison Heal and Goldango with blocking everything, because, Goldango's that guy. But with bans, there are some principles that I adhere to, others maybe don't adhere to. In my opinion, collateral damage is very rarely a priority. So you have to make the most sound policy decision before you worry about collateral damage. So sometimes you end up having to ban a Pokemon when banning a move. Let's take Archaludon. We could have kept it, which is a cool Pokemon, and banned Electroshock, but that wouldn't have really been a sound tiering decision, because then you end up with this whole slippery slope. And I'm not going to get into that, but you see my point. I ignored the collateral. In this case, I realized that the collateral would have been making something like Amoonguss, which is still viable, but worse. And something like Breloom, unfortunately, is no longer very viable. And it also trickles down to lower tiers, which, again, I don't think about that collateral. I know that maybe sounds insensitive. I sound like, this like dark, evil, stall OU guy who doesn't care about your fun lower tiers. It's just the honest reality situation. I don't really care about collateral. Well, okay, I care about everything because I'm an overcarer, but I don't care about it as much as the sound policy decision. So then it really came down to me is the best decision to ban the Pokemon, Darkrai, Iron Valiant, with Darkrai being at the forefront of that discussion, or change the larger overarching sleep rule. And in my opinion, Sleep Clause was kind of not valid, not precedented to begin with. We don't have freeze clause in the game. There's no other clause like that, and you could, make a dozen different clauses that could, improve quality of life, but there's no modern day basis for it. The only justification is history. And I thought that was weak. And I thought banning multiple Pokemon from the metagame, when you don't even know if that's going to stop, there could be other sleep abusers that pop up. I don't know what extent, people want to stop at risk. I thought that, especially if it was just banning Darkrai at the time and not even Iron Valiant, I thought that was going to make this issue linger. So maybe it was extreme. Maybe it was overstepping. Again, I understand people feel that way, but it felt like banning sleep at the time solved the problem without any potential chance for it squeaking out into the metagame in February, March, because this happened in January of this year, etc., while keeping the Pokemon. Now, I think a great counter to that, and you're probably going to say this, is, but preserving those Pokemon, that's preserving collateral. And I agree, but then you could also argue it kind of goes both ways. Like, banning the Pokemon means, like, sleep moves are staying as collateral. Like, at that point, you're kind of making micro decisions as opposed to looking at it at a larger level. So it's just, it's not something that I can say I did 100% correctly, but I do think what I did was justified.
Yeah, I guess it's subjective, and every decision is going to have some sort of collateral damage, or some option is lost.
Yes. And
yeah,
I think you're right in what you said, in that there's possibility for a multi-pronged test. And I don't think I'm wrong in saying that, most variants of that test don't really fit the mold of a suspect. So, there might have been a more democratic middle ground situation, but much in tune with how I've handled this metagame. I saw nonsense. I saw a solution to it that was sound, and I acted on it. And yeah, it did lead, maybe it was cutting a slight corner. Maybe it did make some people feel a little sad that they lost this otherwise usable strategy with Breloom or Amoonguss or, again, whatever sleep powder user. But I stand by it. I'd do it again. I'd probably take a little longer doing it, though, because I do think that the pace at which we did it was catered more towards the Smogon Premier League at the time. And if we waited another week, we probably could have done it in a bit more of a PR-friendly way. After that ban, there was a ton of backlash. Rightfully so, to an extent. I mean, I didn't appreciate it when a guy found my real life phone number and left me a voicemail in the middle of the night, but that's another story for another day.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
But it's so funny looking back at it now though. Like being removed, that's in the lore of Generation 9. That's cool. Not really cool, but you know what I mean. But I do think people had a right to. So I made another post a couple days after the ban, going into the detail, like the process, why we did this. And if I had that all in my initial decision, I think it would have maybe not made a difference to 9 out of 10 people, but the 1 out of 10 people who are in the weeds on Smogon and interested in like the justification, I think they would at least resonated with them. And those are the people that I connect with the most on the forums, on Twitter, on the ladder, or Pokemon Showdown, the OU room. And I feel like I let those people down. So while I think the ultimate decision I don't regret, I do think the way in which I did it, again, it could have used improvement. And I think it was better than a couple past ones. But, again, we're getting like 4 out of 10. Maybe this one was a 5 or a 6 out of 10. We're getting better. I'm learning from my mistakes. But I'll be the first to admit, it's rough around the edges. And I'm very proud of this decision. But I also, look back at it and think kind of wish I didn't succumb to the pressure of a strict timeline. So win some, lose some.
Yeah, and in my video about it, I said, like, I don't necessarily think this is the wrong decision or that it's going to result in a worse metagame or that another decision would result in a better metagame. But yeah, my disagreement with that at the time was just the fact it wasn't a suspect. But, you raise an interesting point where that may have muddied the waters, and it was a difficult thing to actually create a ruling on in terms of what the options are. Another thing I disagree with you on, you say you don't value the historical precedent of sleep clause existing for so many years in OU. I personally do value that. Like, that's just, like, even if it is arbitrary. Like, it is arbitrary. The games do not have a sleep clause in it. But at the end of the day, we have played with a sleep clause for, like, ages, and it's just, like, fundamental to the game, like sleep sacking and everything. So I think if you change that, it's changing a mechanic in a similar way to, like, banning a fundamental mechanic like Dynamax. Like, even though it's not an official mechanic in the game, it is still... Sleep clause is a tiering ruling, but it does affect how you play. It affects your resource management and, like, the dynamics and everything.
Okay, that's a good point. And I don't have a way to disprove that those two things being equated to each other. I view generational mechanics in their own tier because we're presented with a new one on a silver platter every generation, it feels like Generation 8 Dynamax, Generation 7 Z moves, which I agree with you, by the way, they're kind of Generation 6 Megas, my favorite as well. But again, getting back to the topic, we've had one every generation. You could even say Generation 5 had weather. I'm not really sure it's the same, but you know what I mean. I view that as silver platter. We got to give this the white glove treatment. We can't quick ban a generational mechanic. Dynamax was always going to be a suspect, even though it got like 88% ban. That's just a foregone conclusion. Sleep has been a constant in every generation. I didn't view it the same way. I think that there's no right or wrong because there's nothing codified. And I actually have some beef with Smogon. And I'm saying this is one of the bigger faces of Smogon. Smogon needs to codify more things. We need something we could resort to and say, this is the priority, not this. And there's countless different things it could be done for. It's never going to be perfect, but if those priorities are written out, not only for cheerleaders, but for people discussing it, then that will make it easier. That'll give us something to point to. It's never been done. I'm not sure if it ever will be. So sometimes you have to make up decisions and justification based on our perception. And how I perceive things is different than how you perceive things. Does that make you wrong? No. Does that make me wrong? Depends who you ask, but I mean, in my opinion, no. So it's almost like, I don't want to say governmental-like, because I don't want to talk about the government on a Pokemon podcast ever. But it's almost like, you never think of this until it comes up and it's right in the front of you and you're like, oh, I have to make this grand decision and it boils down to this. And then you're like, I wish I had something I can consult. And I didn't. So we went with how we perceived it. And, for better or worse, it's here. I don't think I see anyone complaining about sleep in the modern day, thankfully. It's kind of been like a relief. Amoonguss has actually bounced back in OU well because Superior and especially Ogerpon have been really good. I'm actually like, every time I see an Amoonguss, like my eyes like perk up like, okay, I didn't kill it completely.
Same thing happened in Gen 5, right? Like sleep got banned and then Amoonguss sucks now, but then it actually comes up sometimes. Just regen is good.
It's got a cool kit. Even Breloom is still pretty good.
Yeah.
So it's refreshing.
Yeah, at the end of the day, like, I don't care too much. It's just like semantic and like maybe it could have been done more cleanly slightly. But at the end of the day, I think it has improved the meta to ban sleep, probably. Like, it was a clean way to handle the Darkrai problem that was creating annoying situations. So, yeah, all good, I guess. Like, we can argue
Live
about,
and learn.
like, I'm really just playing devil's advocate kind of, or...
But that's fun. I love these conversations. Like, I am a policy junkie. I've done this for years. When I was 14 years old, I ran Never Used on Pokemon Online. It's been a hot minute, so I don't really mind it. In fact, I encourage people to go out there and find things that I've said or decisions I've made and say, hey, I think you could do this better, or hey, this is another perspective, because that's how I improve. So I think it's all good. I appreciate it.
I mostly play old gens, and the tiering in old gens is very different, where it's not as community involved, and they just do stuff, like sometimes. Like Gen 3 OU implemented a freeze clause. There was no vote, or like, does anyone agree with this? It's just like, put a freeze clause in. Jirachi's stupid. It's got 20% Ice Punch freeze. Just chuck it, just throw it in. It improved the game. No one complained. So, like, that's a bit different.
Very different. Can I ask you a question real quickly?
Yeah, sure.
What do you feel about the Advanced Council? Because I think a lot of people hate their guts, and I'm not really sure how justified it is, because I like every single person on Net Council, and I think they're trying their hardest. But I think it's very hard to tier something. The older it gets, I think the harder it gets.
Overall, I like them. Like, because there's been, like, Gen 3 is a pretty stable metagame. It's different to other gen, where you're changing little things. It's like... usually it's around Baton Pass is the one game-breaking thing, and people keep like solving Baton Pass in unique ways, where Mr. Mime was running around because it has soundproof on it, so it can't get roared out.
Yep.
So it would create this infinite Baton Pass chain with, like, you taunt, can't get roared, you go Vaporeon, get every boost in the world, and then go to, like, Octillery.
It made testing for Classic my worst nightmare a couple years ago.
Oh, yeah. So they, like, every time problems propped up with that, they're pretty quick to act, where they banned... They did a suspect that ended up banning multiple sources of boosts, because it's important to preserve Baton Pass in that game, because there's no other form of pivoting, and some forms of stat passing are also balanced. It's kind of unique. Like Baton Pass is banned in most gens, but in Gen 3 you can pass.
You could never ban it in Gen 3. Now it would like make things like, Celebi, Zapdos, I'm sure there are others, play fundamentally differently, Vaporeon, etc.
Yeah, like Carmine Pass Celebi is cool, and it enables interesting Pokemon.
Broken.
Like Carmine Pass to Gengar is cool, or Carmine Pass to Kingdra can be an interesting win con.
Definitely.
But yeah, they're quick to act on that stuff, and like it keeps coming back in some way, and then they respond to it again. Like they ended up banning Soundproof, the ability, because that just kept enabling Baton Pass chains.
That's kind of funny, but also I think that's probably the right decision.
Yeah, because like it's funny because it's not broken in modern gens at all, but in Gen 3 nothing gets Whirlwind except Skarmory and Hariyama. So like it just made you need to run Skarmory even more than you already did. Which just kind of made the metagame worse, and like you can't use anything interesting on ladder for because of the Baton Pass matchup, which is stupid.
Yeah, and you run into it like every third game, and at the only time you bring the team without it, it's like a nightmare.
And it's dumb because like Whirlwind just beats it, and it's not fun. Like they just thud, and nothing can be done. But
yeah.
So yeah, and then there was also Cacturne. They just banned Sandvale, which has been done in other gens. I think Gen 4, like 4 and 5, it's banned too.
Yep, it saved my guy Garchomp.
Yep. So, but recently they've been under fire because of, funnily enough, Sand Attack is like a weird problem in Gen 3. The accuracy lowering move. Because Ninjask can use it and just like fish for good outcomes, basically. The Ninjask is the guy who passes speed.
Game roulette.
Yeah, so like sometimes it's really dumb where they sand attack you and you try to roar them out, which is usually the counterplay to stat pass, and you just miss roar, because in Gen 3 you can miss roar, and it's just like stupid because you can't do anything. A lot of people think like just ban it the way you implemented freeze clause. They also banned swagger recently, just a quick ban. So why not just ban accuracy drop moves too? It's not much lost. There's like some application where so like in Gen 3, there's a lot of last Pokemon Suicune win condition where you can't roar it out. So a way to counterplay that is by accuracy dropping it, because it can't switch out either. That's some application, but like that's so specific. And
it's not, again, it's collateral. Yeah.
But they haven't done anything on that, and a lot of people just think they should do it because like there's just these cheesy people who use Ninjask Sand Attack on the ladder. But overall, I like them. Sometimes, like on certain things, I guess I disagree, but that's fine, I guess.
They're trying their best.
Yeah. And it's a thankless job. It's like the volunteer work, so I'm not too mad as well. It's all good.
That's how I feel too.
And Super Epic Ampharos is on the council, who's a friend of mine who I think...
Yeah, I actually want to watch that one. She was my teammate in a tournament last year. Oh my god, I'm old. Just think about all the tournaments I've been. And she's a very nice person, and she's a very creative player. Really, really smart.
Yeah, one of the legends of Smogon, in my opinion. And she's the one who banned Swagger, or like got that discussion going. And then there's like McMagan on the council, who I think I just agree with him on everything pretty much. Every time he shares an opinion on like policy or whatever, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I agree.
McMegan is one of the people who inspired me to take my contributions from Pokemon Online to Smogon. I've been a teammate with him a lot. He is one of the better people out there, and obviously one of the all-time greats as a player too. Big fan.
Yeah, absolute legend for sure. Speaking of old gen tiering, you're on the Gen 5 council, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm not sure how much longer, but I've kind of been the figurehead for that generation. Truthfully, my passion for Black and White comes and goes. I think I identify more with SVOU. I played it in SPL. I'm going to probably play it next SPL. But I do still have, I'm still one of, alongside a couple others, the faces of Black White. So, if you have any questions or your viewers have any questions about that, I'm all game. I'm all ears. I'm all mouth.
So recently there was the Reuniclus suspect, and the result was do not ban pretty overwhelmingly. What do you think of that? What do you think of Reuniclus? Do you think it's broken?
I voted do not ban. I think that it is one of those cases where it's a Pokemon that requires a lot of resources to counter, but that amount of resources is not disproportionate with metagame norms. You have other Pokemon in the metagame that, require similar or even greater resources that are, similarly like entangled in the identity of the metagame. Black and White is so unique because it is the broken checks broken generation, in my humble opinion. I'm not a historian like someone you've had previously on BKC. To that extent, but for generations 5 to 9, I know my stuff as well as pretty much anyone. And Black White, you could argue Latios, Excadrill, Drizzle, Thunderous Terrian, Keldeo, Alakazam and Reuniclus are all broken. Probably some more fringe things as well. You could still argue Volcarona without gems. I'm not going to go there, but not the point. Reuniclus is, in my eyes, not one of the top 3 things on that list, but it does require a lot of resources. And a lot of people were annoyed by that because suddenly, it's one of the reasons why Tyranitar is annoying. It's one of the reasons why, Sandforce Excadrill is running offensive sets so often, so it could do so much damage with Earthquake. It's one of the reasons why you see Encore on Rain or Trick on Latios and on Choice users so often. There's a lot of like hyper-specific counterplay to it. In my eyes, the metagame without Reuniclus might have been slightly better because we would have been more open. But I don't tier based on, it'll be better in one step or not. I tier based on, do I think it's broken or not? Because tiering isn't just a one-step game. It could be 2 or 3 or 4-step dance, if you will. So I couldn't tell you if banning Reuniclus would lead to a dead end or a wide open abyss into new possibilities. So I just looked at if it was broken or not in my eyes. I did not think so. A lot of people thought it was worthy of discussion, but then the vibes kind of shifted during the test. I thought it was going to get around 50%, which still would have fell short of the threshold. It ended up getting closer to 30%, which surprised me. I think that's a signal that people mostly like Black-White where it is and accept it as this kind of chaotic metagame where, sequencing and sub-interactions and team compositions hold so much weight. There's not a ton of room for error in these close-knit spikes mirrors or hyper-offensive mirrors. But other games are wide open, and it is what you make of it. Truth be told, Black-White will never be a 10 out of 10 metagame. It's impossible. It'll never reach the peak of competitive Pokemon, which in my eyes has been seen in Generation 3, and controversial hot take in Generation 8, which is probably one of my favorite metagames. Again, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this. I don't really care. I view it as competitive, so... But it will be probably a slightly above average generation with a lot of different modes of play and a lot of different strategy. And I just kind of accept it. And I don't know if I'll ever push for, substantial tiering action again, but I think the community is so riled up that we're probably going to see, more waves and more pushes. And truth be told, a lot of old generation tiering is just vibe based. I know that sounds kind of ratchet, but it is vibe based, and that's all right. So, yeah.
Yeah, I did speak with BKC, and he feels very strongly about Gen 5 and what should be done. More
I could
action,
have
more
a 24-hour video with BKC on Black-White.
Yeah, but it's so divisive, and so many people disagree on what exactly the problem is, and maybe at this point it is literally just a metagame that we can never fully fix or reach a stable point with, because it's had more tiering action in it than any other old gen in recent memory, where over the years there was the gem ban, and then there was Cloister and other things too. And we always say that after this ban it'll be good, and after this one it'll be good. But then it always ends up there's something else that rises to the top and becomes a problem. So I don't know.
It's cinema.
Will it ever end? I don't think so.
No. There's going to be people who eventually push for us to unban gems and ban Volcarona and then we just basically undid the last like year and a half. It's gonna be cyclical because it always is cyclical. Black White is by nature cyclical. We've seen games where it goes 200 turns and it's Spike Wars. We've seen Verf, which is a common weatherless hyper offensive team, like facing off against Drain, and the game goes 18 turns. These different modes just kind of cycle in and out. Different players like them at different times. You know, you find a new set or a new core or a new combination that helps your overall matchup coverage, and that becomes trendy. Then people find things to counter that. Suddenly we see things like Bronzong, a blast from the past when it was only really OU in Black White 1, surface back so it could check Excadrill and Alakazam. And then we see, you know, more Pokemon with status and the ability to displace items. You know, Knockoff had this grand revolution in Black White after it became good in newer generations, despite being lower base power, just to displace items. You know, there's so many different things. And I just find it fascinating. I feel as if, you know, I'm one of the more guys that's like kind of a student of the game in that generation. And sometimes I just like sit back and watch it unfold because my days as the best Black White player, well, one of the best Black White players is over. You know, and in the long history of the tier, Solwyn's probably the best player ever. You know, then you got guys like, you know, me and Dice and BKC and McMegan and just all-time amazing players. But I'm not gonna be back up there. I'm gonna play in, you know, some side tournaments and just watch the amazing minds, the very talented players out there do their thing, and I'm very excited to see what's next. And I'll be in discussions when I feel needed.
Do you think maybe Latios should have been tested instead of Reuniclus? If anything is like clearly a cut above everything else, because Latios would be it, in my opinion, because it is an auto-include on every team, it feels like, or at least you can chuck it on any team and it will succeed, is the most central thing. To an extent, it is checking Thunderous Theory and Keldeo. It's a broken check's broken. Mm-hmm. But also Latias is right there and could just replace its role and be less overwhelming, kind of. Like, what do you think of that?
Okay. Well, first off, what you said about Latios, 1 year, it initially started as a meme, but then became reality. I played 10 games in Smogon Premier League, which is the biggest Black White tour. I used Latios 10 times. I won well over half. So I find it funny that came up because you can use Latios on every team and be successful. That, as an aside, I am not in favor of testing Latios. I think if you test Latios, you are picking a timeline where you have to test a plethora of other things. In current generation tiering, that is always how you do. Latios is broken. It is broken. I accept that. If I was playing Generation 5 as I am Generation 9, and there was an active ladder, and we had the resource to do suspect tests frequently, and the metagame evolved a ton, I'd say, yeah, we do it, and then we probably have to do Keldeo or Thunderous T, and we might have to do something else after both of those, because who knows, and we end up 4 or 5 steps into that dance, and we're good. But it's Black White. We have a ladder that's infrequently active. We have suspect tests that are decided by arbitrary tournament requirements. We have metagames that take so long to respond to one change. You know, the metagame, in my opinion, is still responding to the ban of gems 2.5 years ago, or 2 years ago, let alone the ban of sleep 3 years ago. You know, we're still seeing old teams used and then them changing and cycling through. This is the flaw with old gen tiering. Tiering is intended for current generations with active player bases, and I don't know if Black White would weather that storm. I don't know how many people would care at the start that would care at the end. I don't know if the identity of the two would be anything the same. And do we really want a metagame that's marginally better? If it would be marginally better, that doesn't resemble the metagame that we left before. For me, it just kind of feels like taking all my childhood toys and instead of like giving them to the kid next door or giving them to my kids as hand-me-downs or whatever, feels like throwing them in the dump. That's a sentimentalist in me. I try not to let like emotions cloud my judgment. Well, in the battle they do, but in terms of tiering decisions, less so. I'm actually like pretty composed, believe it or not, and I know a lot of people don't. But this one, you know, it's the heartstrings, and I don't support that personally. I have said though, if there is support for Latios, and in the last survey it was only like 25% support, so not right now, I will not block it from happening. I probably will abstain and step off the council at that time because that signals, you know, a new generation of Black White minds and, you know, Black White theory and Black White cycles. And I'm 25. I'm closer to the end of my days playing competitive Pokemon than the start. I'm still deciding if I even want to lead Generation 10 OU. I know I'm going to stick around for Gen 9, but, you know, I definitely am not going to be the head honcho in Black White for that much longer, if you could even call me that. It's kind of a team effort now. I used to be, but now it used to be. So yeah, I don't support Latios personally. I do think you can make an argument it's broken. I don't think I could disagree with that argument in good faith. And I do think it's a unique case. And I think that you can pinpoint my argument and say, Finch, that argument's stupid. You're contradicting your principles in tiering, and you need to get your shit together. And I couldn't really disagree because like my whole thing is you ban what's broken, and I'm basically saying the opposite here. So I get it. I know that was a big word dump that kind of went through like 3 different loops in the span of 5 minutes. I apologize for the messy answer, but that's kind of how I feel.
That's how some people viewed Gen 5 though, and like a lot of the people still playing Gen 5 like it because of the broken stuff in it. It's like the chaos is its identity to an extent. I mean, BKC does want that to happen. Like you ban Latios and there's a cascade of bans following that. Like he reckons that's what you should do.
He likes like that. Yes, others do too, and I don't think he's wrong. I couldn't say Latios is balanced because it's not. It's broken by definition.
Yeah, I think he had a chat with Peng on his channel, and Peng said like pretty much what you're saying, where Latios kind of is Gen 5, and if you ban Latios, it's not Gen 5 anymore. Like, yeah, it's a valid perspective as well. Like,
I listened to that whole upload at 3 a.m. I was like going to listen to it, like fall asleep, like I do some other videos, and then I stayed up until like 5 a.m. listening to it, like edge of my seat instead.
Yeah, it was an interesting video.
Yes.
To return back to Gen 9 though, I think there's been whispers about potentially retesting Pokemon that were once banned. And I think Pokeaim spoke about how he would like to see Palafin retested. It was broken early on, but maybe in the current metagame it could be okay. What do you think about Palafin and like what else might be retested in Gen 9 that was previously banned, if anything?
Yeah. People are gonna listen to this and find me every word, so I'm gonna speak very carefully here. If there was any Uber I would support retesting, it would be Palafin. And Palafin was one of the most broken Pokemon in the metagame. So why is that? How does that make sense? You know, if there were Pokemon that were less broken that got banned, why would it be Palafin? And the answer is context. Palafin got banned in the infancy. I believe it got banned in 2022. We're now in late 2024. We have Raging Bolt, we have Kyurem, we have Ogre Pond Wellspring. About how to use this Pokemon called Dragapult, which is pretty good, in my humble opinion. You could go down the list. We have Zamazenta using Iron Defense. We have Dondozo. Rillaboom is good. Even the little teapot, Sinistra. You go down the list. I mean, you could say Volcanion, Zapdos as well. And then you could say, but this Pokemon can use Terra, and you can kind of handpick what checks and counters it. Jet Punch is too strong. And I'd say, yeah, maybe it could, but isn't that the point of a retest? To determine if that would make it too much or not, because a retest would not just result in me dropping it like we did something during a release, like when Kyurem just dropped into the tier or Darkrai just dropped into the tier. No, it would result in a formal vote. It would happen months after. It would happen after weeks of discussion and then weeks of it being allowed on the ladder. So my kind of counter to that is that it would be good. Now, is this actually going to happen? Because this sounds interesting. Is it actually going to happen? Is it going to spice the Medic? I don't know. I don't know. I promised later this summer, after the World Cup of Pokemon in the official ladder tournament, which is going to start soon. It might be early in the fall at that point, but there is going to be a discussion in public. We've already had discussions in private. It is the most likely retest candidate. Will it happen? It's going to boil down to 2 things. It's going to boil down to the public temperature and the council temperature. Right now, the council is slightly there's some interest, but it's not enough yet. Right now, the public is a big question mark. I don't know how the public feels. I'm not going to begin to speculate because when I assume, I make an ass out of you and me, if you know what I mean. That doesn't end well for me. But yeah, I mean, if anything's going to be retested, it's going to be Palafin. The only other Pokemon I can make an argument for would be the Zamazenta Crowned, because it loses an item. It becomes much bulkier and gains a steel type. A lot of Zamazenta regulars tricks are like Resto Chesto Berry or Lumberry for, Thunder Wave or Will-O-Wisp, or leftovers for survivability, or running Life Orb on offensive sets. And Crown not being able to do that definitely makes it, easier to check, but it also would be such an extreme that it probably wouldn't be balanced. So yeah, I mean, those are really the 2 Ubers that come to my mind, and Palafin being the most exciting one just because it feels like every single Pokemon that dropped into the game was handmade as a check to it. So that's like super intriguing to me.
Yeah, I guess you never know until you test it. The metagame looks very different, so why not test it? I'm down. Shake things up a bit.
And I think it would get a lot of, excitement. And I kind of like that, so I might be inclined to do it at some point. But I don't want to promise anything because who knows, we might end up having to do suspects on things actually in the metagame, so we'll see.
Some people also mentioned in the comments maybe Solgaleo isn't that bad, and Lugia.
Oh.
What do you think of them?
2 totally different answers. Let's start with the latter. Let's start with Lugia. Lugia is not going to be OU. Multi-scale and that defense with Terra, and like then you realize it's got like boosting options, and like yes, it does have limited move pool, and you can only do so much, but it would so dramatically shift how offensive teams make progress. It would just completely like shift the metagame. Like I'm not saying it could eventually be balanced, but it would require such a drastic shift in turnover from our current like norms that it feels like, you know, if you're looking at like a cost benefit analysis, which I know this is a little bit of a flawed way to look at it, the cost is not close to worth the benefit. And it would be a huge outlier. You know, if boots weren't in the game, that might be a different discussion, but they are. And I do think Lugia would be supremely disruptive. It would make a half dozen Pokemon fringe viable or unviable outright. I don't like it. Yeah, I mean, maybe I sound like a hater. Maybe I sound like the lame cheerleader dude. I don't care. I don't like it. Solgaleo? Yeah, I could see it. I mean, I don't really know if it's broken or not, I guess. I've thought about it a lot, and I've come to the conclusion that it would clearly be strong, but, you know, it can be a revenge skill. Not easily, but it can be done. You know, it can be checked, but the checks would be kind of inconsistent. I think the best case scenario is that it'd be like an A+ or S- to your Pokemon that's like fringe broken, and adding that to the metagame might be good to shake things up, or it might be bad, and the worst cases, it would be like really broken, and we just would remove it. So, you know, you kind of use that same logic I did with Palafin and say, oh, why not retest it? And, you know, if we have the time, I don't mind, but it certainly wouldn't be as appealing to me as Palafin. And I do think that Palafin probably could add more to the metagame because it has another priority move, another form of revenge killing. But, I mean, again, that's like just this grand cost-benefit analysis thing that you can't really say is a perfect science either way. So Solgaleo, you know, fits into the maybe category. Palafin fits into the Finch feels probably, but realistically maybe category. And everything else fits into the likely no category in terms of retests.
I think you're right. Lugia with Terra sounds messed up. That'd be really annoying to play against.
That sounds like a nightmare.
Solgaleo is interesting because, like, recently Iron Crown has risen up a lot. It's another Steel Psychic, maybe a similar role, and that's been very solid in my opinion. So maybe Solgaleo would just outclass that. Obviously, wouldn't have the double hit thing, which can beat Gomora, and it would be more physically leaning. Maybe have like a bit more success with it. I think it can do Rock Polish, I think, and Weakness Policy.
I think it has a couple different setup options, but it doesn't have like a Dragon Dance or like something like kind of sex appeal like that, if you will. So yeah, I mean, it probably could be balanced. I'm just not sure how balanced.
Yeah, it might become a new central thing, which I don't know if you want to shake up the meta that much. It's not super necessary when there's kind of Pokemon that fill its role well enough right now. Like we've got sort of steel types that do a similar thing.
We got a certain king that is very firmly entrenched on his throne, committing all of his gambits. Yeah.
Sure. Also, I have to say that I was initially against the idea of bringing down Zamazenta. I think long term, it's been a good thing for the meta. It's a pretty nice response to King Gambit, and even though it's like super fast, it can solo certain teams. It's pretty reasonable to prepare for, to be honest. Like it's kind of its move pool is just limited enough that it doesn't feel too overwhelming.
If it had like 20 more base attack, it would be broken. But
yeah.
Right now, I think it's the definition of like fringe, but it's really good. And while it does have like some central identity, it kind of counteracts the central identity of King Gambit. Like it's not like crazy to think Zamazenta is broken because it has a bunch of different anti-defense sets. It has Resto Chesto, it has Sub, it has like Terra Dark, Lumberry with Crunch, it has Stone Edge. You know, it could hit all the different checks or counters, but it doesn't have the ability to one-shot things. And a lot of teams can have like 2 soft checks to it, and you could kind of scout it out or feel it out. So I kind of like that dynamic, just because it exhausts Terra a lot when using those luring sets. That, in my opinion, it's like the epitome of like resource management and getting the most out of your Pokemon and getting the most out of your checks and counters in the metagame. So I really like it.
It was a good call to bring it down, I think. It was a good addition.
It was 1 vote away from being quick banned, believe it or not. And then it got suspected, and it did not even come close to a ban. Crazy how much the metagame changes after a release, isn't it?
That is interesting.
Yep.
And
that would have been a mistake of a quick ban, and I voted ban, and I'll be the first to admit I regret that vote.
Makes you think how different things could be with slightly different outcomes on those suspects that can vary in their results, of course. Like, what if King Gambit got more support, got banned? We'd have a different meta completely.
It was like 3% off. Yeah, I mean, it would have changed the whole trajectory. I mean, there was a point when we had 2 people on the council, myself included, or I think it was 3, voting ban on Garganical early in the generation. Like, could you imagine? It would have changed everything. So,
True.
The fact of the matter is that the metagame with Terra and with all these threats, shift so dramatically. And when releases pop up so often with home and DLC, etc., it's night and day between like week 1 and week 4, week 4 and week 8, etc. So it's just been a cool case study, but also like it's taught me how to balance like judgment and like impulse sometimes. So it's been a learning experience.
Has there ever been a decision made by the council lately that you have disagreed with? That's a question from Guy from Canada.
Yes. It's a weird answer, but circling back on our favorite Pokemon from this video, Darkrai, the council recently decided not to suspect it yet, which maybe this is a cop-out answer because I'm talking about a decision that was made in a negative, so the public didn't see this. I was very publicly and firmly in favor of suspecting Darkrai because its set mix has evolved to the point that it's finally making the most of its move pool. It really limits balanced teams. I still view it as suspect-worthy in the metagame. I don't think it's as broken as it was a month or two ago because we're seeing more Zamazenta again. We're seeing things like specially defensive Ting Lu. It used to run a little more physical defense or speed here and there. We're seeing things like Terra to check it a lot more. But there was a time when I thought it was suspect-worthy, and I opposed not suspecting it. Going back a bit further than that, there was also a point in time when we were considering a second Kyurem suspect test, which would have been like 4 months after the initial one. I also advocated for that. Those are really the only two that come to mind. They're things that I, as someone who pushes for a little more suspects than the average councilman or cheerleader, advocated for, but I didn't have the support in-house. And while I probably could have like politicized it and made it happen, I didn't see it as my best decision to go against 40 to 50% of my council. So I waited on it.
Well, I personally think Darkrai and Kyurem feel okay. I don't know though. I'm not as into Gen 9 as I was early on.
Darkrai is like Finch. But Kyurem has balanced itself nice. When Volcarona first got banned, people didn't know what to do, myself included. But now people have a better idea of what to do, and that's good.
Got a question from Snagovich. If you could make one dictated decision in any tier, what would it be? It's interesting.
Oh, that's a great question. Oh my, let me think on this.
For me, I might just nuke Ninjask from Gen 3, just get it out of there completely. I don't know if you could justify that, but...
So, can I give two answers? One would be if I was in the past and one is in the present.
Yeah, sure.
If I could go back to Generation 5, I would have undone Aldron's proposal, which was a ban of Grizzle plus Swiftswin, a complex ban, which opened this eternal wormhole, which I've been dealing with for many years, and I would have banned Drizzle, which would have totally reshaped history. We'd be living in one of these alternate timelines. Like, if anyone's seen the show Community, you know what I'm referring to. And if not, it basically would have unfolded the whole generation differently and the history of tiering differently. If we're talking in the current day, and I could have one dictator move to change the metagame as it is, I would ban Flame Body and Static from Generation 8 and 9. And I'm saying as a dictator because you can't justify this that great, but they're both nuisances. It's one of the biggest gripes actually from the public about Generation 8. The Static Zapdos, Flame Body, Heatran, and Volcarona, punishing things. There's just lottery chance of any, physical attack, U-turn, knockoff, triple axle, extreme speed, it's not, etc. being punished. And it's a huge sway in so many games. And it makes it so that you're tentative to click moves too. And then it creates all sorts of odds assessment and, sometimes bad players fish one good players. And it's a pain in the you-know-what. Is it ever going to happen? Probably not, but I would do it. So I guess that's my soft dictator move, if you will.
That's an interesting answer. I wouldn't have considered banning those, but Flame Body on Volcarona in particular is very stupid because it's not really a defensive Pokemon, but it just comes up sometimes and just further entrenches you in defeat. It's stupid.
And Gen 8, Heatran uses Flame Body 40 or 50% of the time nowadays, believe it or not. And a Weavile clicking triple axle is burnt every single time. And then the game ends your Ice Shard doesn't do enough to Dragapult or whatever it may be, or Swords Dance Garchomp. And it's well, there's that.
That's interesting. Yeah, if you had total power, it's interesting what you could do to improve the game. That of course would open up a lot of slippery slopes. But I've talked about how I spoke with Super Epic Empress. She said it would improve the game to remove full para chance. Probably correct, but that's a crazy thing to do, right?
Oh yeah, I would love that, but my brain didn't even go there just because I'm so hardwired to say no, can't do that, no, can't do this about certain extremes.
It would be awesome if we could actually. Well, I don't know. That would require you to mod the game. But what if they did overhaul these things and fix them? And
If we could, awesome, but I don't think it's ever going to be in the cards. So I like trying to like stay as realistic as I can, because the moment I go down like dreamland, I don't know if I'm ever going to come back.
Yeah, your proposal is banning an ability, which does happen sometimes. I'm talking about modding a mechanic. But
yeah,
it feels similar.
Very different.
Where it's an arbitrary ban of a specific thing. Like, I think it would improve Gen 3 OU if you ban Gengar from using Hypnosis. Not other Pokemon using Hypnosis, but just Gengar. Because it's kind of a stupid set where it can... It can sleep like Pursuit Tar or Houndoom that are supposed to counter it.
Yep.
But then it's inaccurate, and you can't sleep sack reliably. It's like it's dumb.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest myth that people outside the community think about the Smogon system?
Great question. It's that they think every single Pokemon needs the point of the tiering system is that every single Pokemon needs a home. That's not possible.
Yeah,
there are going to be Pokemon that are banned from OU that aren't going to be viable in Ubers. There are going to be Pokemon that aren't usable in the lowest official tier, be it PU or ZU or whatever it is right now. Or there are going to be things that are like banned from UU that aren't usable in OU, or banned from NU that aren't good in RU. You know, it's just, there's going to be some things that are stuck in no-name land. And everyone like gets mad at when we ban things like, oh, now my favorite Pokemon, Volcarona, is not going to have a home. Oh, they banned Drizzle from NU. Now Politoed is like never going to see usage anywhere. Like, yeah, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to play a competitive game. And like the tiering system is cool because it like gives more things to chance, but that's not the main goal of it. So yeah,
I think it's an interesting complaint because like it's often contrasted with Pokemon's official formats. But if anything, Smogon provides more homes for Pokemon and more potential like variety in the Pokemon you can use than any other way to play competitive Pokemon. Like you can play NU and like Sandaconda or whatever is the top tier. I don't know. I think I remember Sandaconda being good down there. Like
it used to be very good. But people...
It's weird the perception that like Smogon just likes to ban things, but actually they create more variety than any other form of competitive
Pokemon. Yeah, but people see that variety and they want to use their favorites. And I literally, like, after every ban, I kid you not, between like Smogon PMs and Discord PMs and like Twitter DMs, I get at least a half dozen people like saying, how can I like use this in like Ubers? Or how can I make this work in Monotype? And I don't have the bandwidth or knowledge of those formats. I feel bad, but my answer is just like, no, I don't know. Or, oh, here's the analysis for it. It's like ranked C- tier in the viability rankings, and like nothing you can do. But like that's not my job. My job is to find balance. Same with the UU tier leaders, who are awesome, and our RU, NU, PU tier leaders, who all do their best job. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people, maybe they're more casual, maybe they're just like certain Pokemon, that feel that way. And I'm sure there are plenty of them watching this video that aren't satisfied with my answer. And I'll try and, like, if any of them have anything, like, contradicting me in the comments, I'll try and, like, take a look what they're saying, but it's just not on my radar, so, yeah.
Well, there's even the Ubers UU fan format now, which solves that problem a bit, where there are a lot of Pokemon in that limbo between OU and Ubers, and there's enough to have, like, a whole format, which does exist as a fan format. So
yeah.
That's cool, right? But even some Pokemon are within the limbo of that format, where they're too good for OU, but not good enough for Ubers UU. And I'm sorry, we can't do an Ubers RU. We can't just make a format like every time something's not
like we have
viable.
Little Cup RU on the forums. We can't have Ubers RU.
Yeah.
But such is life.
Dan J asks, what is the single most annoying complaint that you receive on the council? And why is it more frustrating than others?
Okay. Can I give two answers to this as well?
Yeah.
Okay, so first complaint is a personal one. People say that things get banned because I lost to it or someone on the council lost to it in tournaments, and then they never actually have a replay to back it up, or they go back to when Kyurem got banned from Gen 8 when it beat me in a tournament, which did happen, but wasn't why it was banned. It was banned via a suspect test, which just so happened to be like at a similar time. And now people like always draw back to this or like use it as like conspiracy. And it just grinds my gears so much because like we take so much pride on our process and our accuracy and like our discussions. And then seeing people like, oh yeah, he's just like doing this to like make the rich richer, like this elitist like cast. Like if they lose to this, it has to go. We can't conform, we can't adapt. Like it's not that simple. We've tried to adapt, we've tried to conform, and it's an outlier. And I see that so much, like trending, like, oh, this is 87 upvotes on Reddit. Oh, this is 402 likes on Twitter. Oh, this is like the talk of the OU room. And I get it. I should be above like reading these things and taking them seriously. And I've gotten better, but people feeling that way, it just makes me feel like I'm on an island alone with this mission that like isn't shared with others, and it's just frustrating. And it's a personal thing. It's a Finch problem, not a community problem. People are always gonna like have their little conspiracy theories and they're fun with it. It grinds my gears. But in terms of like practical things. The thing that probably grinds my gears the most is when people say that we are too ban happy. Because in my opinion, we are as ban happy as the hand that we are dealt permits us or enables us to be. The amount of bans is dictated by the generation, and the generation, the hand is, it's like playing a card game, You're going to be aggressive if you get good cards in poker. You're going to be conservative or maybe even bow out if you have bad cards. The field is bad, So this generation required a lot of bans because we preserved the mechanic, but there was an insane power creep, which is a recipe for a lot of tiering action. Last generation, we had some bans at the start because there were different releases, but without a focal mechanic and without like a full power crept decks, there wasn't as much to do. So it was a little more conservative. Gen 7 was probably kind of a slight middle ground leaning towards less action, and so on and so forth. And I've been on council since 2016. Yeah, I'm that old. And it's totally different. And we assume the identity of our game and our metagame, and there's no rhyme or reason why one generation has more bans, another has it less. But calling us overly ban happy when each ban is grounded in the same broken versus non-broken principles is like, it just feels like a lousy excuse. And like when people say bans, like, oh, Smogon did it again. It's like, yeah, we did it again, but that's what we're supposed to do. That's our job. That's the business model. That's the tiering model. If you don't like it, fine, but play other things rather than being critical without actually playing it yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, I get comments like that myself. The anti-Smogon crowd who emerge every time I talk about a ban or something like that. But I, like you, have played this game for over a decade. It's been a source of it's a rewarding hobby, and it's been a part of my life for ages. And it exists because there's like volunteers making these rule sets, whether you disagree with them or not, whether you like something that got banned or not. I don't know. As long as I got something to play. I think I spoke with Freeze about that, where like he's just whatever the metagame is, he'll just play it. Like there's something to play. These arguments go in circles. They're so divisive. At the end of the day, we just want to play the game, in my opinion. And there's formats for everybody. If you like less bans, you can play Ubers or even Anything Goes, or even Battle Spot Singles, which is the official singles format on cartridge, which follows VGC's rule set of restricteds and item clause and everything. If you prefer those rules,
I'm with you. There's a place for everyone.
Yeah, and Gen 9 OU is not my main format. It's Gen 3 OU. And that exists because Smogon exists. And they preserve old gens and they simulate old gens on Showdown and everything, which is epic. Like, Nintendo doesn't do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of nuance. I personally think that there's a format out there for everyone. It's just not always going to be OU. Some people are going to want to play Monotype. Some people are going to want to play Little Cup. Some people are going to want to play VGC. Some people are going to want to play Generation 3. Some are going to want to play Generation 6. That's all fine with me. I've never said my generation is the best. I've never said it deserves a disproportionate amount of attention. It just so happens that a lot of people like the current generation. If it's good, if it's bad, and so I take it seriously. But at the same time, there's a different cup of tea for everyone, and I'm just happy that so many people find our community and our game interesting. And I think, just going through the cast of characters you've interviewed on this podcast, it's kind of cool, seeing, Freeze Eye, for example, plays a ton of VGC and our tiers. We had Moxie, who is mainly VGC. You've had, Super Epic Ampharos, ADV. You've had BKC, who's a historian of all generations of OU. It's such a mixed bag, and I just think that speaks to how diverse and how amazing competitive Pokemon is as a whole. So yeah.
I also think, like, dare I say, it's a bit entitled to comment and be like, I want OU to specifically be like this. Like, I want it to just morph to what I want. Like, I don't want legendaries, but I do want Palafin, and I don't want Sleep Claws, but I do want that. Like, you don't invent a format of your own desire. Like, many people exist in the world, right? They have different thoughts and opinions. We all got to come to an agreement on one thing to center around. Yeah, right? Like, you just get to decide what the format is.
And it's the internet. It's never going to be easy, and it's already hard to begin with, so we just do our best, and whatever comes of it comes of it. I like sitting down at the end of a generation, reflecting on it all, and saying, hey, good couple years worth of work, let's do it again next time. So yeah.
How do you think you would personally rank every generation of OU? That's a complicated question, but just off the cuff, what do you think? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, sorry.
You're good.
Did you hear my question or did I cut out?
I did not hear your question if you had a question.
Sorry. I asked, how do you think you would rank every generation of OU, personally?
Okay. So Do you want me to do a 1 through 9, or can I do like an A tier, B tier, C tier, D tier? It doesn't matter.
Maybe just a linear ranking would be more straightforward. It's a bit
Okay.
arbitrary, but
So I'm gonna say Advanced OU Generation 3, and this will probably be good for your audience. Is my favorite in terms of quality, in terms of competitive. I really like it. And this is gonna hit the opposite chord. I think SS is gonna be my second favorite. In my opinion, it's one of the most competitive. Offense. Oh, everyone's like, oh, it's not. Offense is actually pretty good. Ton of different things you could do. Building is wide open. Strategies, diverse. I actually think it's still developing. It's cool. Third is where it gets tough. I'll probably put SV for now. That's probably going to be like a shocker, but I actually think it's aged really nicely. I think it's kind of found a good place the last like 6 months or so, 3 months or so, let's say. It could easily be fifth on my list in a week. It could easily be second on my list in a week. So, yeah, but right now I'd say third. After that, this is probably my quote unquote bias pick. I'd put Black White fourth. I do think, we know what it is. It's crazy, but I do think there's a lot of outplaying, building type of components to it. I really like it. After that, it gets tough. I do rank 1 and 2 pretty lowly. I'd probably say Oras and then SM. I think both are good metagames, but not great. Oras, I do like. I wish they removed things like for example, King's Rock, we're seeing more Cloister Cheese, which I've seen in Black White. I do think, there's a little much of the extremes with Hyper Offense out of Revolution a couple years ago, but I think overall it's a pretty good metagame, and it had a really high peak in its prime. SM, I feel like it used to be very, very good. It's gotten more stale. It hasn't aged well. I think it's kind of stuck in this little brother, old gen territory. We're also not seeing many builders come out with new things. Sky Penguin, Zomog have, but, there's also a lot of recycling. It feels like, things are kind of decaying away. I'm not the biggest fan of it right now. So, whereas I think its ceiling is high, I think it's, unfortunately not close to it at the moment. Then I would say DPP. I do very well in DPP in some tournaments. I hate it in others. Very hot and cold with me. I think there's some variance. I think it's kind of power crept beyond where a team previewless format can be, but I also think that's a bit of a skill issue from someone who wasn't around during DPP. So, mixed bag. Then I'd say GSC and RBY respectively. GSC, I think, is really cool. I think the better player wins more often than not, but it's not as often as you'd like. There's things like Thunder Paralysis. There's things like crazy sleep mechanics and freeze that can dictate a lot. Sleep Talk Roulette. Zapdos is a crazy Pokemon. And that's what I got. And then RBY is just like a totally different level of odd assessment. It's a fun metagame. It's a competitive metagame. Every one of these is competitive, but I'd have to put it at the bottom just because it feels like you're playing a different game, and it's not necessarily my cup of tea.
Interesting. Good answers. Yeah. Pretty different list from mine, but I get where you're coming from.
A lot of people have SS and Black White a lot lower.
You got Gen 9 quite high too, which is surprising. I like it, but yeah.
That's okay.
I don't know how I'd evaluate Gen 9 compared to everything else. Maybe I'd have to wait until,
it's not a finished product.
Yeah. I guess in its current state, I would put it above Gen 8 and 7 personally. Gen 6, people are very fond of, but I don't have too much experience playing myself. But it is interesting, and cool developments happen from what I've seen in Gen 6.
Yep, I agree.
Gen 2, a lot of people are also very fond of, Smogon veterans really like.
Yeah, they're probably good at it too. I'm awful. I brought a Pokemon that should have had growth with Growl to Smogon Classic. And I'll wear that loss like a man.
Very similar words.
Yeah. No, my Jolteon was not doing what I thought it would do. But such is life.
That's a funny question from No Thankyou. Asks, what are your top 5 fruits? You a fruit fan?
If people follow my Twitter, they probably know I'm not the biggest fruit fan.
Are you posting chicken wings and burgers like a good American?
Yeah. No, actually, it's funny. After this, I'm probably going for Chinese food, which is totally different side of the spectrum. But with that in mind, my favorite fruit's always gonna be strawberries. I love strawberries, and I think they're pretty healthy. I don't know.
Probably.
After that, grapes. I prefer purple to green, but both are pretty good. Third, let's go with bananas. I like the potassium. I used to have them a lot when I used to work out and play baseball in my younger days, back when I was somewhat more active. I'm not sure if it was a healthy thing. I always was told to eat bananas. I like bananas. It just kind of stuck with me. And then I guess oranges. I've always liked oranges. No real other thought into it. And then fifth, I guess apples, just because it's such a known fruit. I don't actually like eating apples, but I also don't think I like 5 fruits. So yeah.
You exhausted all the good fruits.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
I went to China recently and I tried a lot of interesting fruits I've never had before. They got more variety over there in fruits. Jackfruit
awesome.
is delicious. Dragon fruit, I think I've had it in Australia too, but it's like in season over there, or it's better. They got something in the water. I don't know. It's damn good.
Oh, I might have to. One day I want to travel the world. Right now, I've never actually been to Europe. I've gone to like the Caribbean, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, and throughout the United States a ton. But like one day I really want to get out there and explore. So hopefully I'll make more money.
There's a lot to see out there.
Yes.
We got a lot of questions about chicken wings, actually.
Okay. I mean, do you want me to just like, is there like a general like question, or like a repeat question at all, or?
Let me just search chicken wings on Control F. Best sauce for chicken wings. What do you reckon?
Vague answer. Don't go to chains. You know, the Buffalo Wild Wings, the Wingstops of the world. They're fine. They're like a 5 or a 6 out of 10. But if you could find a place that's local to you that really specializes in it, there's always something special. There's always something less generic about it. Like for me, there's this place local to where I live, and there's a couple of them, so I'm not really like going hyper specific, called Sharky's, and it's really good. It's like an 8 out of 10 or an 8.5 out of 10 wing, but you're not going to get those all over the world. You know, especially for people who live in like the northern United States, you're going to find a wing place local to you that's good. You know, if you just need like a so-so meal that's like quality but not amazing, like not standout, you know, chains, Buffalo Wild Wings, Wingstops of the world, Cluck You Chicken, you know, those type of places, they're going to be good. You know, Popeyes, I guess, although their wings are bullshit. Don't even get me started. You know, they'll be fine. But yeah, no, like the specific place is your neighborhood. They really can like grab you, captivate you, you know. And also like there's some extra like personal feel to it. Like, oh, I'm supporting a local business as opposed to I'm supporting a chain. Maybe that's just like me being like a sentimentalist, but I've always enjoyed that more. So like personally for me, whenever I like am in a different town, like let's say for a weekend trip with my girlfriend, or like for work, or just, you know, because I'm out and about, maybe in a baseball game in town, I'll find a wing place that's highly rated but not a chain, and I'll go there. And that's where a lot of my pictures for my social media feed tend to be. I don't really like naming places because I don't want to like tell everyone in the world where I am. That's just a safety thing. But with that in mind, you know, if you could find a place to a comfort place, you'll be surprised like how it'll feel. And that's kind of my sentimental description of chicken consumption.
I would agree. Why do you like chicken wings specifically? Seems like they're like your favorite food. You're constantly posting images of chicken wings. You got sentimental value towards chicken wings.
Yeah.
Why not chicken tenders or other kinds of chicken?
I do like tenders. I do like tenders and other types of chicken. I probably about 35 to 40% what I eat ends up being some type of chicken. Like I had dinosaur shaped chicken nuggets as a like on the go lunch this weekend, for example.
There you go.
But chicken wings in particular are special to me because one summer I was down the shore in my state. We have like beaches down south in my state, and I went with my cousins and I went with my uncle, and I'm very close with my family. I love my family. I love the part of my family that doesn't contradict my political views. I can't stand the other part. Neither here nor there. And it was going to be our last summer going down the shore because I was going to be starting a higher school, and a couple other people are going to be hiring higher schools and like moving out of the area for jobs. And one night, instead of like going to bed early, because normally my family goes to bed early, I'm like the only night owl in my family. We went out to this bar, and I was underage, so like we had to stay in like a certain like family area, and we all got a bunch of chicken. And it was the first time I was having chicken wings. I was probably 10 at the time, maybe 9, and I was like, oh my god, what is this? This is so good. And I had a bunch of them, and then I got a stomachache because I do that. But and I always referred to that as the chicken wing night for like 2 or 3 years because I got very sentimental. Like my family, like we go like all like we made like slideshows about all like cruises and our trips, and like shared them with the family and put them on like social media and all that corny crap. And every time I went with my family, I got chicken wings. And then, you know, I got older and I went to college, or I started being more social in high school, or, you know, with my girlfriend in the last couple of years. And when we went out with friends or together or with my family, we got chicken wings. And, you know, eventually they stopped eating chicken wings at the breakneck pace I do because they're not crazy like me. But for me, that was like my thing. And I kind of associate that meal, as weird as it sounds, with family and with, you know, good times and good vibes. And it's just stuck with me the last 15 years, and I'll always be that way. And unfortunately, the frequency at which I eat it means I've got to stay in shape. So I end up, you know, walking a lot and exercising just to keep up with my consumption, which I've actually found a better balance the last year or two. But yeah, it's definitely a big thing with me. And like, if you see me posting chicken wings and saying, have a good weekend, I really like mean like, you know, have a good weekend, you know, be with the people you care about. It's cool. It's just how I live. So yeah.
That's a nice story. There is sentimental value to the wings.
Yes.
It seemed like it. You got the fixation on them, and for it seems like a good reason.
I'd say so. Yeah.
And what is your favorite sauce on the chicken wings?
So I'm pretty lame. So normally, if I go to a place and I don't know their full palette, if especially it's my first time, I'll just ask for generic like hot or generic buffalo, which medium or hot. But if I go to like a place where I know the sauces, I like mango habanero. It definitely clears your nostrils like the first wing or two. It's definitely a little spicy, but it's good. And if I'm in a point where I'm like at like a business thing or I need to like do a long drive home, I'll probably get honey barbecue or like tangy, just because I am a stomach ache risk. I actually have a weak stomach, and I can't like be on the road and like have a stomach ache. That's just how like I am. So yeah, I mean that's those are kind of like my go-tos. So yeah.
Cool.
You ever make wings yourself at home? You cook much?
No, but I'm moving out. Like I still live with my parents. I'm 25. I'm moving out in a week with my now girlfriend of 2 years, and we are going to learn to cook. Well, she already is a masterful cook chef person. I'm gonna learn, and that is on our like bucket list, like our top 3 things. So yeah, that's in my near future. I've been going through like this like quarter life crisis recently, like all these things I need to learn how to do, and she's like cool and composed, so she's gonna teach me that, and I'm very excited.
Spoke with Pokeyam about this actually, which is funny. One of the best things I cooked recently was Coca-Cola chicken wings, which is a Chinese recipe.
Ooh,
Very good, very good.
okay, I'm gonna put that on the list. You said Coca-Cola chicken wings?
Yeah, you marinate the wings in like this. I can't remember exactly.
Ooh.
You marinate them in.
Yeah, no, I'm like watching like a YouTube short on it, like on my phone.
I think
with
like
no
soy
sound right now.
sauce and some other
Yes.
ingredients. And then when you're cooking them up, you put some Coca-Cola in there, and it soaks into it. And you turn it all the way on high heat, and it creates this really nice outer layer of like sort of this Coca-Cola infused sauce on the chicken wing.
It's a little like a crispy sauce, yeah.
Yeah, when I went to China, my brother-in-law's wife made them, and they were delicious. So I wanted to learn how to make
Well,
them. And
That's fascinating. That's something I'm going to take that away, and I'm going to do some research, and I might do that myself.
yeah, it wasn't too hard to make. I would take a look. It sounds like it's
Yeah,
up your
no, I
alley.
mean, yes, definitely. Thank you.
What are some other things you enjoy doing outside of the Pokemon Council stuff? Last time I talked to you, you mentioned baseball was a hobby of yours,
Yeah.
and sports. You're a sports
Yes.
enjoyer, a chicken wing enjoyer, evidently. Anything else there?
I watch a lot of TV shows, but here's the caveat. Between the months of end of March towards mid to late October, I don't watch any new TV shows because baseball's on 162 out of 180 nights and then potentially the playoffs afterwards. Every night from 7 to 10, when my team is on, I'll watch. Well, not every night, but most nights. Some nights I'll be with my family or my girlfriend or whatever, but even then we find ways to watch, or I'm following like on my phone. It's just like my life. I grew up on it. I used to play. I'm a huge Yankee fan. For those in America, you're probably rolling your eyes at me. That's fine and well. That's like as big of a Pokemon geek I am. I'm even bigger into baseball. Like on my personal like social media, like it's just me like retweeting baseball things or like commenting on baseball like analytics. Like I'm that guy. And I'm similar. Well, not similar, but I'm passionate into like football. I recently followed cricket. I actually really like cricket. Basketball, hockey. I'm actually excited to watch the Olympics this summer too. Outside of that, TV shows, I really like just like the generic sitcoms. New Girl, Friends, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, like to name a few. I'm pretty like I have like a teenage girl sense of television and music, I guess. And outside of that, I am a creative writer. I used to run the poetry thread on Smogon actually. I haven't done that in a couple years, but whenever I have feelings, I just write them down in my notebook, and that kind of helps me get through life. So yeah.
Poems usually, or like stories? What else do you write?
So in college it used to be poetry, because I was going for a creative writing minor at my school, and I had to take like a class that was specifically geared towards poetry, and it really like intrigued me. Then a year before I graduated, they canceled the creative writing minor program, which made me sad. Another story for another day though. And then I actually opened it up to different like just like more unstructured, I'd call some of them short stories, I'd still call some of them poems, kind of wide range. Sometimes it's just like 6 lines and like a little together. Sometimes it's like a couple lines. Sometimes it's like pages. And I have notebooks. And sometimes it's like even like Pokemon stuff or like, work stuff. And sometimes it's just like random thoughts about like the world. And I think I really only share it with like 1 or 2 people in life. And I think it's a healthy thing to do if you're into that. But some people don't even need that. And some people see therapists. And those people are doing it the right way. For me, I just got a notebook. So yeah.
I actually think writing can be a healthy thing to do. Even if you don't show anybody,
Yes.
it's good to just get the thoughts out of your head and
yeah.
like
I mean, I used
unload.
I used to like talk to people, and then those people are like thousands of miles away from me now, and they said like you should try writing, and then like college happened, and like I just it just kind of stuck, and now it's like just like a periodic place in my life, you know, maybe like once every week or two I'll jot something down now. It used to be like once every day or two, so but yeah, still sometimes.
It's interesting too to like look back on what you wrote in the past and see your mindset back then, because you often forget. Like you just living in the present all the time.
Yeah,
So you
like,
should reflect
I'm a
on
very
like,
different person
yeah.
now than I was when I started like leading OU or playing on Smogon, night and day. So
A lot of people asked about your YouTube channel. Like, are you gonna make videos again?
yeah.
What are your plans with the channel?
Okay. Hopefully. So as I alluded recently, I'm moving out on August 1st. And when I move out, I'm gonna have a little office area in my new apartment where I could comfortably do YouTube. Doing that at my house right now requires being in my basement, which isn't climate controlled. So for example, it is 58 degrees or 82 degrees in my basement. I'm using American terms. Basically it's very cold or very hot in my basement certain times. And then during the like comfortable times, it's normally baseball season. So like I work and then I watch baseball and then I have to like play tournaments. So I don't have time for it. When I move out, I'm gonna have time to do that. So I need to make a decision if I'm gonna try content creation as a serious medium and be a part of that community. If I think I have the talent and the motivation to do so, which motivation never been a problem with me. Talent, we'll see. Or B, if I'm just going to stay in my lane. I support a ton of creators, and I will continue to support them. If they ever have questions, they can always reach out to me. And, you know, eventually fizzle out into the crusty underlands of the Pokemon community. I don't know what's going to happen yet. I don't know what it's going to be like living on my own. I'm not going to jump into that decision, but I wouldn't be shocked if people started seeing uploads from me in September or October. I wouldn't be shocked if they never see an upload from me again, but I'd say there's like a 70 or 80% chance that I actually go back to creating on like a weekly or bi-weekly basis because I think I have a lot to offer, but it will quickly be determined if that's a success or not because my time is valuable to me. I'm a very busy person and I do act with like a lot of intent and purpose, so we'll see.
Well, if you got any questions or want any advice on the YouTube stuff, I'm open to chatting about that with you. And I think that your channel could do well. Like, people underrate their own talents, I think. Like, you got all these years of knowledge of competitive Pokemon. You're quite eloquent. I think you can definitely make some good videos that people would enjoy. And I used to watch your channel. You did those SPL replay analysis videos and a tier list of Gen 5, which I don't think you finished. You did like half of it, and then you did the other half. Unless I missed that.
Sorry, I didn't. I actually, I have a reminder on my phone that's been off for the last like 2.5 years that said finish tier list video. And every time then I scroll past.
I was actually waiting for that, and it never happened.
I'm so sorry to you and about 300 other people.
Because there's so many cool Pokemon on the lower end, like Kadabra and like all these interesting things. I'm like, man, he's going to talk about these. That's going to be so interesting.
You know what?
I'll never know.
That actually motivates me to do that. Again, nothing's going to happen for the next month because I'm like going to be entering the biggest like change period of my life. But there is a lot of motivation, and I also think like, and you and Frieza had an awesome discussion about like content creation versus like life, and like how he's still like working and how you've like switched to full time. I'm never going to be a full time creator. I work a 40-hour-a-week job, but like if I could have like that added like monetary bonus, like that intrigues me because it's like working for something I love because I don't love my career that much. So like that aspect of it like is very fascinating to me, and I probably am more likely than not to start creating. It's just a matter of if I could find a rhythm and if I could find like my niche, because I think you and Freezeye and AIM and others have done such a great job finding what you excel with. You know, Freezeye finds these interesting topics that like you could like catch someone's attention and he could explain it to you. You know, you are, you know, multi-talented in my opinion. Not only have you done these topical videos, but also you become a very good interviewer. You're good at current events. You know multiple generations, or at least you know Gen 3, and you're able to keep up with the current generation, and that's marketable. Joey is so good at like captivating people just watching him play and like chat with his friends, and he's kind of established a scene for himself. You know, that is so awesome to me. And if one day I could even have a fraction of that, that would be cool. But I'm not sure if that's my future and that's my path or not, and we'll find out one day. So yeah.
Well, I think you could be quite good at it. We've seen BKC has a channel where he pretty much just clicks record and lets his mind do the rest, where he just rambles for a while. He just has such encyclopedic knowledge. He can just go off on a specific topic, although he does go on tangents.
I love BKC.
But
yeah.
I think you could just be like a specific video idea about like why is this good in OU, or why do we think this is, or maybe a broader concept like Pinkacross does, more educational kind of things, where he talked about the
concept of mid-grounds, which is one of my favorite videos from him, which is it.
Pink Across is awesome and deserves more love. Yeah, and there's other YouTubers that we could highlight as well. I can't begin to like say how awesome it is to be part of like a community that has so many talented like creators. Because like I actually spend a ton of my time just like before bed, like listening to like your videos or Blunder's videos or whoever's videos, and and I'd love to like join that like fraternity one day. But life is complicated, and I don't want to commit to anything and then let people down. So we'll see.
Yeah, you don't have to even view it as a commitment. Like you've got your job. There's no risk to it. You could just do what you feel like here and there, experiment, be open to stuff. That's what Fraser said.
Disagree.
Like he has his own job, so he's more open to taking risks on YouTube because he's not super reliant on YouTube or anything. So
yeah, the issue is BKC is a well-adjusted adult. I'm someone who will stay up until 4 a.m. when he has to wake up at 6 a.m.
I don't know if BKC is a well-adjusted adult.
I've met him in real life many times. He is a funny guy, but he has his crap together. He's smart. I'm not saying I'm not, but like I have an adoration, a respect for BKC. As it's almost like this like crazy father figure in the competitive Pokemon community. And like I'm like the drunken uncle. So yeah.
Have you seen BKC's recent videos where like his computer broke down or something, or like his power was out? And it was just a webcam of him talking about like Volcarona for 20 minutes while cooking. It's like what is going on?
He's a genius. It's like it's cinema. It's marketing, and I think BKC realizes he has something special, and he's run away with it. And I have just so much respect for that. And he's having fun. And he hasn't had fun playing in like tournaments for a number of years now. He's having fun doing this and like talking to these people in this silly setting. And that's what it's all about. Like the reason why when you asked me if I wanted to come to your podcast was because I thought it would be fun to talk to you and your audience because we're all people that have this hobby together. And BKC, does that on his channel in his own medium, and I think that's awesome. And that's like part of why I'm like drawn back into it. So we'll see, but BKC is special, and everyone should watch BKC and your stuff, of course, too, as well.
There are so many cool channels that like nobody knows about. They're just like great competitive players. I don't know if you know Arctic Breeze, the Gen 3 OU player. He has a great channel where he has like in-depth looks at his teams. He's funny because he records like outside in nature. You can hear birds chirping. There's very dramatic like this poetry of like describing why he's using rest on Tyranitar or something. Like no one watches it, but I don't know. I love those. Those are the channels I watch. Are like some genius of Pokemon who has no regard for like presentation. It's like a really zoomed out browser window. His tabs are visible. It's like the worst production value of all time, but it's like the most genius level insight into Pokemon you've ever heard.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why I appreciate Pink Across's channel, because it's rare that like a great Smogon player is also like good at teaching and making videos. They're different skills.
Yes, I agree, and I couldn't recommend him enough.
Like I'm not the greatest Smogon player. I'm like okay, but my talent is more in making videos, I think. But it's cool when people can do both.
Yeah, you're a communicator though. Like I listen to you talk, and like I understand the points you're making better than 9 out of 10 people I talk to in life. And I think that says something. And I think you have, a certain talent, a certain poise, and I'm very excited to see where it goes. And I said similar things about Freezeye when he kind of struck gold with these like shorter videos. He's got a bit more longer span recently, but like and I find it so interesting how we express ourselves so differently. Like the way you and BKC approach your channels are two totally different things, but I find them both similarly appealing, and it's about the same subject matter. And like I think that range like in the community is awesome. So yeah.
Appreciate that.
Of course.
It's cool seeing the once niche world of a hyper-specific part of competitive Pokemon YouTube kind of evolving into a larger thing. It's awesome to see. Yeah,
and it's going to keep getting bigger. People are saying Smogon and Pokemon are dying. It's not. I promise. Numbers say otherwise.
I think in my first interview with you, we spoke about that, about the growth of Smogon. There is still the issue where a lot of the big Smogon tournaments sort of happen behind closed doors. There's not much coverage of it. There's not much like...
Maybe that's
in
my
the
niche.
way of like a casual fan who is vaguely interested. There's no real pipeline for them to like start keeping up with tournaments. It kind of just is happening on the forums. And I think you said before that like they've tried to cover it on Twitch, but no one cares. And
not enough people.
Yeah. And I spoke with Frieza about this. Like, how do you get people interested? How do you cover it in an interesting way? And I've sort of tried to do that with my buddies on my Revival Tournaments channel, like Gold Mason and Rezo and all them and Simeon. Thinking about like Pokemon's this unique thing.
So it's going to be covered in a more unique way. We're kind of in uncharted territory there where I think Callus also, I don't know if you know Callus, who does the Callus Invitational.
I know Callus very well for a long time. He was once my SPL manager.
Yeah, he inspired me to do the tournament coverage because he had it on his channel.
Yeah, so little tangent. I apologize. Callus actually used to like go all the way back to Pokemon Online days, and before he deleted his channel because he kind of rage quit when he didn't get manager pick one year, he had a ton of like cool videos about like ADV in like 2010 to 2013 in that era, and that's how I learned it through these tournament players and all these terms. Like I didn't know what Crocoon was before I started listening to Callus videos when I was like a noob, like way back then. So like I don't think creators realize like you're not only reaching people who like understand the game and want tournaments, like people are learning the game and the community through you, and that's how you grow it. And that the forums are such an antiquated concept. For every person on the forums, you're going to see 3 or 5 on Twitter, on YouTube, so yeah.
I like that Smogon sells a forum. It feels very old internet, but yeah, it's not very modern. Like
it's not
moving
as accessible.
now towards Discord for tournaments and stuff, which I think is good.
Mm-hmm.
Our tournaments are hosted on Discord. You can just join on Discord.
Yeah, I think Discord is like the great gatherer nowadays. Discord and social media. So yeah.
Do you think more could be done for covering tournaments, or even to be honest, like I spoke with BKC a lot about the SPL format being a bit archaic and hard to follow. Also spoke with Electro Wind Girlfriend about how like there's not too much like team affinity for most people, where every year the teams are gonna draft different players. It's not like I'm going for the Tigers or whatever because they got different people this year. It's not like in a sport where you have an affinity for a certain regional team or whatever. So for a casual viewer, it's a difficult format to understand. It's difficult to follow who's on which team, who's winning, like in the eyes of like a completely casual player. And it shouldn't be that complex. Like a tournament should be a simple thing. This guy beats this guy. It progresses.
Here's my thought. If the right person with the right platform and the right motivations put their mind to it, and I'm debating if like come SCL or SPL time, I'm going to try my hand at this or not for what it's worth. Made like a video explaining what it was, and then made like videos covering like hype matches. It could gain traction that's like 10 or 20 or 25% more than what currently exists. And that's significant, but not the end of the world. There is a ceiling on this. There is a cap on this. Just because there's only so many people that care about this game beyond a casual level. And of those, only a certain portion of them care about tournaments as opposed to ladder. But it can be much greater than it is right now. I don't know if it'll ever happen because it requires getting your ducks in a line. And Smogon's, format, being on forums and having, so much turnover year to year, it does, work against it. But you can still make more of than what's currently there. Smogon's just done it the wrong way. Smogon, like, just randomly having, like, Twitch uploads on Sundays didn't do anything because it wasn't marketed well. And Smogon's YouTube channel died years back, so it's been reliant on, like, creators. And these creators are not only motivated by Smogon's tournaments, they're motivated by their own brand, and rightfully so. They should be. You have your own style. Freezeye has his own style where he, like, brings in certain games. You discuss a lot of ADV tournaments, and that's awesome. And BKC, like, reminisces on so many tournaments, but, like, no one is dedicating themselves to Smogon so much as they're dedicating themselves on their niche within the world of Smogon. So I think it's something that if years back Smogon really worked for, they could have capitalized, and now it's like kind of in the hands of the free market, and the free market makes of it what they will make of it.
That's true.
So, yeah.
And like I think Blunder and Pokegame sometimes do watch SPL games and cover them. We did it on Revival tournaments. We covered specifically the Gen 3 games. So yeah, it is mostly just creators of their own volition doing it for something to watch, or like a cool thing happened, like Lapras got used or something. I made a video about that. But like, yeah, I've noticed that sometimes Freezeye will upload like his perspective on his side channel of playing in the World Cup of Pokemon or something. And the World Cup of Pokemon, I think, has potential because there's an inherent, like the teams usually are the same people because there's only so many people in a region. There's, affinity for your region. Like I'll go for Oceania, you'll go for America or whatever.
U.S. Northeast, the team that won in its first gen, has underachieved since then. Let's not talk about that. But yes, I do think World Cup actually is the most marketable. The issue is that it only takes place over 3 weeks for the majority of teams, and that's like such a small like part of the year that it is I don't want to say struggle, but yeah. If World Cup was as long as like SPL or SCL, where you're like 9 weeks of countries duking it out, it probably would be more marketable. It'd probably be easy. Like you could make videos about like your like local region, or like the star of Italy playing the star of France, and that would be cool. And like people in Italy and France would probably like show up in your analytics, like, oh, they watch this like 28% more than average. But right now we're not there, and I'm not sure if we ever will get there. And honestly, I don't really think it's like the end of the world, but it is like lost potential. And Smogon is definitely not perfect, and that's one of its downfalls.
At the end of the day, someone has to do it. Like, we can complain about this, but it is a lot of work to commentate tournaments or even organize all that. Like, our tournament, ADV Revival, was quite successful. There was a lot of videos coming out. It was fun. There was like, it was open. So the early Swiss rounds were like just total newcomers, sometimes up against like heavy hitters. There were high seeds. And some upsets in there, which were fun. New stars rose out of the ashes that we'd never heard of before, like Hum Yum. But it was also a lot of work. Like, I was very burnt out by the end of that. I was commentating, like, every day I was commentating a set.
A ton of time. Yeah.
I had to do all the thumbnails for other commentators. I had to sometimes edit the audio, like, and all that. Those little things add up. And
definitely.
Yeah, so
it's a big time sink.
That's why I really appreciate that people like you take the time to do all this tier and cancel stuff, because it is for the benefit of all of us that we have a format to play, whether we disagree or not about whatever happens.
Yeah.
Like,
well,
it's
I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it because I love the game, but I'm glad that you enjoy it too.
Well, you're also doing it for the community, which includes me.
Yes, but I love this community. In this community, like, I've learned, and I'm not going to go on this tangent, but I've learned how to live my life through this community. I've built like my values. I've learned about all sorts of things. I've like, found like my personality a lot through this community. So like me giving back to it is in part like also like investing in myself and growing too. Like these friendships that we make on here, these videos we watch, like they're reflected in like our personality and like our experiences in life too. I know it's like a cheesy thing to say, but it's true. I've been like talked about Smogon and my experiences in like job interviews. Like I've progressed my career. So yeah.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's good time.
Well, there's potential, and we could look to communities like the FGC who have great grassroots events, great tournament personalities, commentators, dedicated people. A lot of that is also volunteer work. There's like a bit of money in it maybe, but often not much compared to like the amount of work put in just by passionate people.
Pennies on the dollar as to what they could earn if they were like doing like a job that paid a steady amount. And they don't do it for the money though, they do it for the passion. So that's kind of the boat I'm in.
A lot to learn from other communities and a lot more we could do.
Yes.
But yeah, I'm not going to complain too much because like someone does have to do that work, which is difficult. Anyway.
One day.
Yeah, maybe one day. But anyway, I think like we've had a long chat here, a lot of great conversation to be had.
Can I just say one last thing before we head off?
Sure.
I just want to say thank you to you for inviting me. I actually have like been kind of lurking these, I mean, I watched the full one with Freeside, the full one with BKC, and parts of some others, and I think like someone having a podcast is super interesting. I'm gonna promote this, on all my socials. I think it's so cool, and I'm excited to see who you have on next, and it's it's humbling to be a part of this. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to speak to me, and I'm very excited to see the comments and everything. And if people have questions in the comments that didn't get to in the video, I'll do my best to engage with them.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. Can I ask you one last question as well?
Please, open book.
Insert Funny Thing asks, would you win in a fight against a Garchomp? You get 2 hours of prep time and a small bucket of ice cubes. What do you think?
The small bucket of ice cubes are 4 times super effective. I used to be a pitcher in baseball. If I could throw them with enough accuracy at enough speed, Garchomp, if it isn't holding a choice scarf, will not be able to evade them. Therefore, I'm going to say I'm going to win.
And you got it prep time. Maybe you could practice your throw technique.
Prep time, forget it.
Or hide behind a bush or something. Maybe we could say the ice cubes are like
hide behind a tree and just chuck them.
Maybe the ice cubes are like, we would say 100% accurate because you're good at baseball. Like 10 base power?
We'll go with that.
It's a little ice cube.
But I mean, if you have like a bucket, that's like, 10. I mean, that's like using icicle spear. I'm basically Mammoth Swine, so.
True. And you're going to hit all hits because you're just excellent.
That good.
So there you go. Finchinator would win against Garchomp with the requisite prep time and the correct...
And that's why my next avatar will be Mega Garchomp.
Actually, does Yachi Berry get consumed off one hit of Icicle Spear and then the rest is super effective?
So the first hit does like next to nothing. The next hits do normal.
So Yachi Berry and Sash won't even help Garchomp here. He's toasted.
No, it would need to like have Sand Veil and Sand Be up basically.
Which I do not think there's a sandstorm where you are, so you're good.
I've actually been in a sandstorm before. But that's another story for another day.
Not today, hopefully.
Yeah, nope, not the guy.
Well, there you go, folks. Thank you very much once again, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yep, you too. All right, bye.